The grocery store security camera captured the exact moment a billionaire's world shattered. Not from a business deal gone wrong, but from watching a mother quietly remove milk from her cart because she couldn't afford it. What he did next would either save two families or destroy everything he'd built. But here's what nobody saw coming. The woman he helped that freezing Tuesday wasn't just another stranger in need. She was about to expose a truth that would force this tech mogul to choose between his empire and his humanity. Before we dive in, drop a comment with your city name so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The thing about being a billionaire is that people think you stop seeing the world the way normal humans do. They imagine you floating through life in some kind of bubble where poverty and struggle are just concepts you read about in quarterly reports. Mason Carter knew better. He saw everything. He just hadn't figured out what the hell to do about it. Until that Tuesday. "Daddy, why are we going to this store?" Sophie pressed her face against the Range Rover's window, watching the tired strip mall slide into view. "Mrs. Chen always gets our groceries delivered." Mason killed the engine and sat there for a moment, hands still gripping the steering wheel. "Because, kiddo, sometimes we need to remember how most people actually live." Sophie wrinkled her nose. She was 8, brilliant, and had inherited her mother's ability to cut through his nonsense. "That sounds like something you'd say in a meeting to sound deep." He laughed despite himself. "You're not wrong." The grocery store was one of those places that had seen better days, probably around 1987. Flickering fluorescent lights, linoleum floors that had given up trying to look clean, shopping carts with wheels that pointed in different directions like they were all having individual crises. Mason grabbed a cart that seemed least likely to require an engineering degree to operate. Sophie hopped alongside him, her designer sneakers squeaking against the floor. "Can we get the cookies with the—" "No. You didn't even let me finish. You were going to say the ones with extra frosting, and the answer is still no. You already had candy today." Sophie's eyes narrowed. "That was breakfast candy. This would be afternoon cookie candy. Totally different food groups." "That's not how—" Mason stopped mid-sentence. He'd caught sight of her across the produce section. A woman, maybe late 20s, standing absolutely still in front of the lettuce display, like she was trying to solve a complex mathematical equation. But it wasn't the stillness that grabbed his attention. It was the baby. The infant was maybe 4 months old, draped across the woman's shoulder in a faded sling that had seen too many wash cycles. The baby wasn't crying. That was the problem. Babies that young should make noise, gurgles, coos, something. This one just hung there, limp and quiet, with a pallor that made Mason's chest tighten. "Daddy?" Sophie tugged his jacket. "You're staring." He was. He forced himself to look away, pushed the cart forward. None of his business. Chicago was full of struggling families. He couldn't save them all. He'd learned that lesson the hard way with his foundation. Throw money at poverty and watch it disappear into a system designed to perpetuate itself. But then he saw the second child. She was maybe 6, standing next to her mother with the kind of stillness that only came from being trained not to ask for things. Her coat was too thin for November in Chicago. Her shoes had holes near the toes, covered with what looked like duct tape painted over with marker to match the original color. The little girl's eyes tracked across the produce like she was memorizing it. Apples, oranges, grapes, things her family probably couldn't afford. "Come on, Chloe." The woman's voice was hoarse, tired in a way that went bone deep. "We need to move." Mason watched them disappear around the corner toward the dairy section. Sophie had gone quiet beside him, her hand still gripping his jacket. "Did you see the baby, Daddy?" "Yeah, sweetheart. I saw. Something's wrong with her." "I know." They stood there in the produce section, surrounded by abundance neither of them had earned, while somewhere in the back of the store, a mother tried to figure out how to feed her children on whatever thin margin existed between survival and collapse. Mason had built a tech empire by recognizing patterns others missed. Right now, every instinct he'd honed over 15 years was screaming at him that he'd just witnessed something important, something that would matter. He just didn't know how yet. The dairy aisle smelled like cold concrete and expired dreams. Mason pretended to compare yogurt brands while watching the woman, Elena, he'd heard the little girl call her, stand absolutely frozen in front of the milk. She'd been standing there for 3 minutes. He'd counted. Her hand would reach out, hover over the gallon of whole milk, then drift to the cheaper store brand, then back again. Her lips moved like she was doing math nobody else could see. The baby, Lily, based on what he'd overheard, still hadn't made a sound. That wrong, awful silence. Chloe stood next to her mother, one small hand clutching the cart. She didn't whine or beg or pull things off shelves like Sophie used to do before Olivia died, and the whole world got serious. This kid just waited, patient in a way children shouldn't have to be. "Mommy?" Chloe's voice was barely a whisper. "Is Lily okay?" Elena's hand stilled on the milk. "She's fine, baby. She feels hot." "I know. We'll get her medicine once we—" Elena's voice cracked. She cleared her throat, tried again. "Once we get home." Mason moved closer, still pretending to shop. Sophie had wandered off to look at the cheese display, which gave him cover to observe without looking like a complete creep. Elena finally grabbed the store brand milk. Then she checked her phone, an ancient iPhone with a cracked screen held together by what looked like clear tape. Her face went pale. She put the milk back, grabbed a half-gallon instead, stared at it, put it back too. "Excuse me." An elderly woman pushed past Mason to grab butter, breaking his line of sight. By the time he'd repositioned himself, Elena and her daughters had moved on. He tracked them through the store, 3 aisles back, watching her decision-making process repeat itself over and over. Pick up the name brand. Check the price. Put it back. Grab the generic. Calculate. Sometimes keep it. Sometimes put it back too. Her cart held maybe 20 items. Rice, beans, a loaf of bread, peanut butter. Things that stretched. Nothing fresh, nothing that cost extra. Sophie reappeared at his elbow. "Are you following them?" "I'm shopping. We have one thing in our cart. You're following them." Smart kid. Too smart. "What do you think we should do, Soph?" Sophie looked at him with those eyes that were too much like Olivia's. "I think something bad is happening to that family." "Yeah, me too." "So we should help." If only it were that simple. Mason had learned through his foundation that helping was complicated. People had pride. They had dignity. They had every right to tell a rich stranger to mind his own damn business. But that baby's silence. "Let's finish our shopping first," Mason said. "Then we'll see." They moved through the store, Mason barely paying attention to what they were buying. His focus stayed locked on Elena, tracking her trajectory toward the checkout lanes. He watched her unload her cart with careful precision, watched her count items, watched her pull out a handful of crumpled bills and count those too. Then he watched her face change. It was subtle, the way her shoulders dropped half an inch, the way her jaw tightened, the way her eyes went distant like she was somewhere else entirely. The universal body language of someone realizing they'd miscalculated and the margin for error was zero. Elena leaned toward the cashier, a teenage kid with bad acne and worse posture. Mason couldn't hear what she said, but he could see the cashier's awkward nod, watched him remove items one by one. First the milk, then the bread, then the peanut butter. Chloe watched each item disappear with the kind of resignation that comes from having seen this movie before. She didn't cry, didn't protest, just stood there holding her mother's hand while their dinner got smaller. "Mommy." Chloe's voice was so quiet, Mason almost missed it. "What about breakfast?" Elena's face crumpled for just a second before she forced it smooth again. "We'll figure something out, baby." "But you said we need milk for my cereal and for Lily's formula, and—" "I know what I said." Elena's voice was sharp, then immediately softened. I'm sorry, baby. Mommy we'll make it work." Sophie's hand found Mason's. She was crying silently, tears tracking down her cheeks. "Daddy." Her voice was barely a breath. "Please." Mason looked at his daughter, this little girl who'd grown up with everything, who'd never gone hungry, who'd never watched her mother count change and come up short. Olivia would have known what to do. Olivia always knew what to do. But Olivia was gone, and Mason was here. And sometimes, maybe, that had to be enough. Mason told Sophie to wait with their cart. She nodded, still crying, still holding onto the handlebar like it was the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly revealed itself to be much bigger and scarier than she'd understood. Elena had paid for her reduced groceries, maybe 8 items total, and was loading them into a canvas bag that had holes in the bottom. The cashier had already moved on to the next customer. Nobody was paying attention to the young mother and her 2 quiet children anymore. Except Mason. He pushed his cart up to the register. "Hey," he said to the cashier, "I need to add some things." The teenager looked up, bored. "Sure, man. Go ahead." Mason turned to the store, Sophie already reading his mind and racing ahead. They moved through the aisles like they were being timed. Milk, the good kind, whole milk, organic. Formula, the expensive brand, 3 containers. Diapers. Baby Tylenol. Bread. Peanut butter, jelly, fresh fruit. Vegetables. Chicken. Ground beef. Pasta. Sauce. Cereal. Crackers. Cheese. Eggs. Sophie grabbed things too. Juice boxes, graham crackers, a stuffed elephant that played music when you squeezed it. "For the baby," she said, clutching it to her chest. Good thinking. They filled the cart until it overflowed. The cashier's eyes widened as they unloaded everything. "Dude, that's a lot of groceries. Ring it up." "All of it?" "All of it." Mason glanced towards the exit. Through the glass doors, he could see Elena in the parking lot, trying to load her bags into the trunk of a car that looked like it was held together by hope and expired registration stickers. The trunk wouldn't close properly. She kept slamming it, but the latch was broken. The total came to just over $300. Mason handed over his black card without looking at the screen. "Yo, is this for like a party or something?" the cashier asked, bagging items. "Something like that." Sophie helped load bags into their cart. When they were done, Mason pushed it toward the exit, his daughter running ahead to hold the door. The cold hit them like a wall. November in Chicago didn't mess around. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees since they'd gone inside, and the wind cut through his jacket like it was personal. Elena was still fighting with her trunk. Chloe sat in the back seat, visible through the window. Lily was presumably in there too, still silent, still wrong. Mason took a breath. This was it. The moment where he either committed to being the kind of person who actually did something or retreated back into the comfortable distance of writing checks to charity organizations and never seeing the faces of the people he claimed to help. Olivia's voice echoed in his memory. "Don't just talk about it, Mason. Be about it." He pushed the cart across the parking lot. Elena heard them coming and turned, instinctively stepping between her car and the approaching stranger. Her face was guarded, closed off. One hand moved to her jacket pocket. Pepper spray, probably. Smart. "I'm not trying to scare you," Mason said, stopping a careful distance away. We saw what happened inside. Me and my daughter." Elena's expression didn't change. "What happened inside was none of your business." "You're right. Absolutely right. But I don't need charity." Her voice was ice. "We're fine." "Ma'am, Don't ma'am me. I know how this works. Rich guy sees struggling woman, plays hero, expects—" She trailed off, disgust clear on her face. "We're fine." Sophie stepped forward before Mason could respond. "My mom died 3 years ago." Elena blinked, thrown off balance. "She was really nice," Sophie continued, her voice steady despite the tears still on her face. "She used to say that sometimes people need help, and sometimes people can give help, and the important thing is not being too proud or too scared to let those things match up when they're supposed to." Mason stared at his daughter. He'd never heard her say anything like that before. Elena's armor cracked slightly. "Sweetheart, I'm sorry about your mom, but—" "My daddy's not a bad person," Sophie said. "He's just sad a lot, and he doesn't always know how to fix things anymore. But he saw your baby, and she looks really sick, and we have medicine and food, and my daddy has a lot of money that just sits there not helping anybody, and it makes him feel worse that he can't bring my mom back, so maybe if he helps you, it'll help him too." The silence that followed was broken only by the wind and the distant sound of traffic on the main road. Elena looked at Mason with different eyes now, not trusting exactly, but less hostile, more confused. "Is that true?" she asked quietly. "About your wife?" Mason nodded. Car accident 3 years ago last month. I'm sorry. So am I. He gestured to the cart. Look, I'm not trying to. Whatever you think I'm trying to do, I'm not. I saw what happened in there, and I have the means to help, and my daughter is right. I have a lot of money that doesn't do anything except make more money. And frankly, that feels pretty empty when there's a sick baby 10 feet away, and her mother is fighting with a broken trunk because she can't afford to get it fixed. Elena's eyes were shining now. You don't understand what you're asking. I'm not asking anything. I'm offering groceries, that's it. Nothing is ever, that's it. This is. They stood in the cold parking lot, two strangers trying to figure out if trust was possible in a world that had given them every reason to believe it wasn't. Finally, Elena spoke. Why? Mason thought about lying, about giving her some noble-sounding speech about paying it forward or corporate social responsibility. But Sophie's brutal honesty had set a new standard. Because my daughter asked me to, he said, and because I watched you put milk back on the shelf and I saw your kid's face when you did it. And I thought about how easy it would be to just look away and go home to my penthouse and forget I ever saw you. And then I thought about what kind of person that would make me, what kind of father that would make me. He paused. And I didn't like the answer. Elena was crying now, silent tears that tracked through what might have been yesterday's makeup. She swiped at them angrily. This is embarrassing. It's human. I used to have a good job. I used to be able to provide for my kids. I used to... Her voice broke. Fuck. Sophie's eyes went wide at the curse word. Mason pretended not to notice. The groceries are already paid for, he said gently. You can accept them or I can donate them to a food bank. Either way, they're not going back in my pantry. We don't need them. You do. Elena looked at the cart, then at her car with its broken trunk and its questionable engine light and its inspection sticker that had expired 6 months ago. She looked at the grocery bag with holes in the bottom. She looked at her back seat where Chloe was watching through the window with wide, hopeful eyes. Then she looked at Mason. If I say yes, she whispered, will you promise me you're not going to want something later? Because I can't. I don't have anything to give you. I don't have anything left. Mason's heart cracked a little more. The only thing I want is to know that baby gets medicine and you get to keep your milk. More silence. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of coming snow. Okay, Elena finally said. Okay. They loaded the groceries together, working in silence broken only by the wind and the occasional squeak of Sophie's shoes. Elena's trunk wouldn't close even after they'd removed some items to fit everything, so Mason ended up using the rope from her emergency kit to tie it partially shut. This won't hold for long, he said, testing the knots. Long enough to get home. Where's home? Elena hesitated, then rattled off an address in a neighborhood Mason knew primarily from crime statistics and urban renewal proposals that never seemed to materialize. That's a 40-minute drive from here. Bus was faster, but it broke down 2 weeks ago and I can't afford the car repairs and the bus together, so... She trailed off with a shrug that tried to be casual and failed. Mason pulled out his wallet. Elena's face immediately closed off again. Don't be... Please, he said. Just let me. He pulled out $500 bills and held them out. Elena stared at them like they were snakes. I can't take that. You can. You just don't want to. There's a difference. It's too much. It's not enough. Mason kept his hand extended. Your baby needs a doctor. Your car needs a mechanic. Your family needs stability. $500 won't fix any of that permanently, but it might buy you enough breathing room to figure out your next move. I don't even know you. My name is Mason Carter. This is my daughter Sophie. Now you know us. Elena looked at the money, at her car, at the window where Chloe was still watching. Mason could see the war happening behind her eyes. Pride versus desperation, dignity versus necessity. Desperation won. She took the money with shaking hands. I'll pay you back, she said, the words coming out fierce and desperate. I don't know how or when, but I will. I swear to God I'll pay you back every penny. No, you won't. I will. You won't because I don't want it back. Use it for your kids. That's all I ask. Elena clutched the bills like they might disappear. Why are you doing this? Mason looked at Sophie, who was standing next to Elena's car, making faces at Chloe through the window. Both girls were giggling now, the sound almost shocking in its normalcy. Because 3 years ago, somebody asked me at my wife's funeral what I was going to do differently. Mason said quietly. They said grief either makes you smaller or it forces you to grow, but you can't stay the same. And I've spent 3 years trying to figure out what growing was supposed to look like. He met Elena's eyes. Maybe it looks like this. Elena wiped her face again. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Thank you feels too small. Then just take care of your daughters. That's enough. Elena nodded, unable to speak. She pulled a business card from her pocket, wrinkled, outdated, from her previous job. This number doesn't work anymore, but if I write my cell on the back... She scribbled numbers with a pen that barely worked. If you ever need to reach me, she said, handing it to Mason. For anything. If you ever need... I don't know what I could possibly offer you, but if you need anything, please call. Mason took the card, then pulled out one of his own. Heavy stock, embossed logo. Carter Tech Solutions. If you need help finding work, he said, call me. I know people. Lots of people. Someone will be hiring. Elena stared at the card like it was written in a foreign language. You run Carter Tech? You know it. Everyone knows it. You're... She looked up at him with new understanding. You're that Mason Carter, the billionaire tech guy. Oh my God. Don't. Don't what? Don't start treating me differently because you know my net worth. 5 minutes ago, I was just some guy in a parking lot trying to help. Let me stay that guy. Elena studied his face, searching for something. Whatever she was looking for, she seemed to find it. Okay, she said. Just some guy. Got it. Sophie ran over, the stuffed elephant clutched in her hands. Can I give this to the baby? Please? Elena's expression softened. Sweetheart, you already... Please? She needs something to hug when she feels bad. Everyone needs something to hug when they feel bad. The wisdom of 8-year-olds. Elena nodded, unable to speak. Sophie opened the car door and gently placed the elephant next to Lily's car seat. The baby still wasn't moving much, but her tiny fingers grasped at the toy's ear. See? Sophie said, satisfied. She likes it. Chloe's voice came from the back seat. What's your name? Sophie. What's yours? Chloe. That's a pretty name. Thanks. Yours too. Mason and Elena watched their daughters talk through the open car door, two kids from completely different worlds finding common ground in the space of 30 seconds. Kids are better at this than we are, Elena said. Yeah, they really are. Elena checked her phone, anxiety flashing across her face. I need to get Lily home. She needs medicine and a cool bath and... Go, Mason said. Drive safe. Call if you need anything. I will. Thank you. Thank you so much. Elena's voice cracked again. She gave up trying to talk and just climbed into her car. Sophie stepped back as the engine turned over, coughed, sputtered, then caught. Black smoke puffed from the exhaust. The car pulled out of the parking space with a grinding sound that suggested multiple mechanical failures happening in slow motion. Mason and Sophie stood in the cold parking lot and watched Elena's taillights disappear into Chicago traffic. Did we do a good thing, Daddy? Mason pulled his daughter close. Yeah, sweetheart. I think we did. Will we see them again? I don't know. I hope we do. Chloe seems nice, and Lily needs more stuffed animals. One elephant isn't enough for proper hugging. Mason laughed, the sound surprising him. You're absolutely right. One elephant is definitely insufficient for proper hugging. They loaded their single bag of actual groceries into the Range Rover. They'd ended up buying almost nothing for themselves, and headed home through the darkening afternoon. Neither of them knew that the phone call would come 2 days later. Neither of them knew this was just the beginning. All they knew was that for the first time in 3 years, Mason felt like maybe he'd done something that mattered, something Olivia would have been proud of. And for now, in the cold and the dark and the complicated mess of being human in a world that didn't make it easy, that was enough. The call came on Thursday evening while Mason was reviewing quarterly projections that suddenly seemed meaningless. His phone buzzed with a number he didn't recognize. He almost let it go to voicemail, had let dozens of calls go to voicemail that week, but something made him pick up. Hello? Silence, then breathing. Then a voice so quiet he had to press the phone harder against his ear. Mr. Carter, this is... This is Elena. From the grocery store. Mason sat up straighter in his chair, the spreadsheets forgotten. Elena, hi. Is everything okay? More silence. He could hear background noise, traffic, maybe a bus station. I know you said to call if I needed anything, but I've been sitting here for 20 minutes trying to convince myself not to bother you, and I keep chickening out and hanging up before it rings. And this is actually my fourth attempt, and I'm sorry, I shouldn't have… Elena, breathe. What's going on? He heard her take a shaky breath. You mentioned you might know people who were hiring. I did. Did you mean it? Because sometimes people say things, and they're just being nice, and they don't actually mean, I meant it. Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. I need a job. I can't keep doing this. Lily's better. The medicine helped. Thank you. She's better. But I'm down to $43 and rent is due in 6 days, and my landlord already gave me an extension last month, and I can't ask again, and I've applied everywhere, but nobody calls back and I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And she was spiraling. Mason recognized the pattern from his own 3 a.m. panic attacks in the months after Olivia died. Elena, stop. Listen to me. What did you do before? What kind of work? Medical billing, I was good at it, really good. I worked for Midwest Healthcare Solutions for 4 years, and I processed claims and handled insurance verification, and I knew all the codes and I never made mistakes, and then they downsized and I got laid off, and my references are solid, but every place I apply says I'm overqualified or they went with someone else or they're not hiring right now even though their website literally says they are, and what's your availability? The question seemed to throw her. What? For work. When can you start? Whenever. Tomorrow. Today. I have a neighbor who watches the girls when I have interviews, but she can do more hours if I need, and Chloe's in school most days, and… Do you have a resume? Yes. It's not great. My printer ran out of ink, so I've been using the libraries, and the formatting looks weird on their computers, and… Email it to me. The address on my card. Right now? Right now. He heard rustling, the sound of her fumbling with her phone. Okay, I'm sending it. Did you get it? Mason's laptop chimed. He opened the email, scanned the attachment. Her resume was actually fine, clean, professional, exactly what someone in medical billing should have. 4 years at Midwest Healthcare Solutions. Associate's degree from a community college. Certification in medical coding. References from supervisors. Your resume is good, Elena. It is? Yeah, the problem isn't your qualifications. The problem is you're applying cold to companies that get hundreds of applications. You're getting lost in the pile. So what do I do? Mason was already scrolling through his contacts. He knew at least a dozen healthcare executives, had invested in 3 medical tech startups, served on the board of 2 hospital systems. Let me make some calls. Give me until tomorrow afternoon. You're serious? Completely serious. What's your number in case I need to reach you? She rattled it off. He saved it in his phone under Elena Brooks, medical billing. Mr. Carter, I can't ask you to… You didn't ask. I offered. There's a difference. Why are you doing this? It was the same question she'd asked in the parking lot. Mason still didn't have a good answer, so he gave her an honest one instead. Because I can. Because you need help, and I have the ability to provide it, and pretending I don't would be a choice. And I'm trying to make better choices. He could hear her crying softly on the other end of the line. I'm going to pay you back, she whispered. Someday. Somehow. I'm going to focus on taking care of your daughters. That's all the payback I need. After they hung up, Mason sat in his office for a long moment, staring at her resume on his screen. Then he started making calls. The first 3 went to voicemail. The 4th was answered by Richard Chen, CEO of Integrated Medical Solutions, and one of Mason's former business school classmates. Mason Carter, twice in 1 fiscal year? Should I be concerned? Rich, I need a favor. That's what you said last time, and I ended up chairing your charity gala. I'm still recovering. Different kind of favor. You still hiring for your billing department? Always. Good medical billers are impossible to find. Why? I know someone. 4 years experience, certified, excellent references, needs a job yesterday. There was a pause. What's the catch? No catch. Mason, come on. Nobody calls in favors for random medical billers. What's the real story? Mason considered how much to share. I met someone who needs help. She's qualified for the work, she's desperate for the opportunity, and I'm in a position to connect the dots. That's it. You're vouching for her? I am. Another pause, longer this time. She available for an interview tomorrow? I'll make sure she is. 9 a.m., our downtown office. Tell her to ask for Jennifer Park in HR. I'll let Jennifer know to expect her. Thanks, Rich. You owe me dinner, somewhere expensive, with wine. Done. Mason called Elena back before he could second-guess himself. She answered on the first ring. Hello? Integrated Medical Solutions, tomorrow at 9. Ask for Jennifer Park in HR. Silence. Then a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh or both. Are you serious? The CEO is a friend. He's expecting you. Don't be late. Dress professionally. Bring copies of your resume. I can't. This is real? This is real, Elena. What if I mess it up? You won't. You don't know that. I know you processed medical claims for 4 years without getting fired. I know you're smart enough to survive on $43 with 2 kids. I know you're resourceful enough to duct tape your daughter's shoes instead of making her go barefoot. You're not going to mess it up. More crying. He was starting to recognize the specific sound of her trying not to fall apart. Thank you, she managed. Thank you so much. I don't know how to... Go get some sleep. Set 3 alarms. Knock them dead tomorrow. After they hung up, Mason poured himself a drink he didn't want and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, looking out at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere out there, Elena was probably panicking about what to wear tomorrow. Somewhere out there, her daughters were sleeping in an apartment he'd never seen in a neighborhood he'd only driven through. Sophie appeared in the doorway wearing pajamas covered in dinosaurs. Was that the lady from the grocery store? Yeah, kiddo, go back to bed. Did you help her? I'm trying to. Sophie patted across the room and hugged him around the waist. Mom would be proud of you. Mason's throat tightened. You think so? I know so. She always said you were good at fixing things when you stopped overthinking them. When did you get so wise? I was born this way. You just weren't paying attention. He laughed despite himself, ruffling her hair. Bed. Now. School tomorrow. Are we going to see them again? Elena and Chloe and Lily? I don't know, Soph. I hope we do. I liked them. After Sophie went back to bed, Mason returned to his laptop and did something he hadn't done in months. He opened the folder of photos from before Olivia died. Birthday parties. Holidays. Random Tuesday afternoons. His wife's face looking back at him from 1,000 frozen moments. In one picture, she was volunteering at a food bank, hair tied back, wearing an apron covered in soup stains, laughing at something someone off camera had said. She'd dragged him along that day. He'd complained the whole drive there and then spent 4 hours ladling soup and feeling more useful than he had in months of board meetings. Stop thinking so much, Olivia had told him on the drive home. Just do the thing in front of you that needs doing. That's all helping is. See the need, fill the need, move on. See the need, fill the need, move on. He'd forgotten that part, the moving on. He'd gotten stuck somewhere between seeing and doing, paralyzed by the size of problems that felt too big to solve. But Elena wasn't a problem. She was a person. And connecting her to a job interview wasn't solving poverty or fixing systemic inequality. It was just doing the thing in front of him that needed doing. Maybe that was enough. Maybe it had to be. Friday morning arrived with snow flurries and the kind of cold that made Chicago feel like it was personally offended by the concept of warmth. Mason was drinking coffee and helping Sophie find her other shoe when his phone rang. Richard Chen, calling back way too early. Tell me she showed up, Mason said by way of greeting. She showed up 30 minutes early, sat in the lobby reading medical coding manuals she brought from home. And Jennifer interviewed her for 20 minutes, came to my office, and said we'd be idiots not to hire her on the spot. Mason let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. So you're making an offer? Already did. She starts Monday. Full benefits, paid training, salaries in line with her experience. Jennifer's emailing her the paperwork this afternoon. Rich, I owe you. Yeah, you do. But Mason, you should know, she cried during the interview. That a problem? No. The opposite. Jennifer asked her why she wanted this job, and she said, "Because my daughters deserve a mother who can afford to buy them milk." I've interviewed 100 people this year, and nobody's ever given me a real answer like that. She's going to be good for us. After they hung up, Mason sat at the kitchen counter feeling something unfamiliar. It took him a minute to identify it. Relief. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of something that felt like forward motion. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I got the job. I can't believe I got the job. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I don't know how to repay you, but I'll find a way. I promise." Mason typed back, "Congratulations, you earned it. Take care of your girls." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "Can I buy you coffee to say thank you properly? I know you're probably busy and you definitely have better things to do, but I'd really like to say thank you in person." He hesitated. This was where it could get complicated, where boundaries could blur, where a good deed could become something messy and unclear. But then he thought about Olivia at that food bank, laughing with strangers, seeing people instead of problems. "Coffee sounds good. When?" "Sunday afternoon? There's a diner near my place. Nothing fancy, but the coffee's decent." "Send me the address." Sophie looked up from tying her shoe. "Was that Elena? How did you... You smile different when you're texting her. Are we going to see her?" "Maybe. She wants to say thank you for the job help." "Can I come?" "It's just coffee, Soph." "So? Chloe might be there. We could be friends." Mason looked at his daughter, this kid who'd grown up with a nanny and a private school and play dates scheduled by his assistant, asking to be friends with a girl she'd met for 5 minutes in a parking lot. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, you can come." The diner Elena had chosen was exactly the kind of place Mason never went to. Linoleum floors, cracked vinyl booths, a laminated menu sticky with decades of syrup. The coffee came in thick mugs that had been washed 1,000 times, and the whole place smelled like bacon grease and broken dreams. Mason loved it immediately. Elena was already there, sitting in a corner booth with both daughters. Lily looked better, still pale, but alert, making small cooing sounds as she grabbed at a plastic spoon. Chloe was coloring on a paper placemat with crayons that had seen better days. Sophie spotted them first and ran over before Mason could stop her. "Chloe, hi, do you remember me?" Chloe looked up, shy but smiling. "Sophie from the parking lot." "Yeah, do you want to color together?" "Okay." Just like that, they were friends. Mason slid into the booth across from Elena, who looked nervous and exhausted and relieved all at once. "Thanks for coming," she said. "I know you're probably really busy and—" "Elena, stop apologizing for existing. You asked me for coffee. I said yes. Here we are. It's allowed to be simple." She laughed, a little breathless. "Nothing in my life has been simple in a really long time." "Fair enough." A waitress appeared, 60-something, tired eyes, a name tag that said Dolores. "Coffee?" "Please," Mason said. "You eating?" "Sure. What's good?" Dolores looked at him like he'd asked what oxygen was made of. "Pancakes." "Get the pancakes. Trust me." Pancakes it is. After Dolores left, Elena leaned forward, her hands wrapped around her coffee mug, like it was the only thing keeping her anchored. "I start Monday," she said. "Full-time. Benefits kick in after 90 days, but they're giving me an advance on my first paycheck so I can pay rent. Jennifer, the HR woman, she was so nice. She said they're excited to have me, and I'm going to do great, and—" Her voice cracked. "I haven't felt excited in so long." "You should feel excited. You earned this." "I didn't, though. You handed it to me." "I made a phone call. You're the one who showed up 30 minutes early with medical coding manuals. You're the one who impressed them enough to get hired on the spot. I just opened the door. You walked through it." Elena shook her head. "You don't get it. Nobody just helps. Not like this. There's always a catch. There's always something they want in return." "I don't want anything, Elena." "Everybody wants something." Mason thought about that. "Okay, you're right. I do want something." Her face closed off immediately, walls slamming back into place. She started gathering her things. "I knew it. I knew there had to be—" "I want to know that your kids are okay," Mason said quietly. "That's it. That's what I want. I want to live in a world where I don't have to watch mothers put milk back on shelves. I want to believe that sometimes people help each other just because they can. I want my daughter to grow up understanding that wealth is only worth having if you use it to make things better. Elena stopped moving. That's really what you want? That's really what I want. She sat back down slowly, searching his face for lies. Whatever she found there seemed to satisfy her. Okay, she said. Okay. They drank coffee in companionable silence while the girls colored and Lily gnawed on her spoon, and Dolores brought pancakes that were, in fact, incredible. Can I ask you something? Elena said eventually. Sure. Your wife. How did you keep going after? Mason set down his fork. I didn't, not for a long time. I just sort of existed. Went through the motions. Sophie's nanny did most of the actual parenting for the first year. But you're better now? I'm functional now. Better is probably overstating it. Elena nodded like she understood. Chloe's dad left when I was pregnant with Lily. Just walked out one day and never came back. No explanation, no forwarding address, nothing. And I kept waiting to feel better, and it just never came. The better part. Yeah, that sounds about right. Does it get easier? No, but you get stronger. Or at least you get more practiced at carrying it. They sat with that for a moment, two people who'd been broken in different ways, finding unexpected common ground in a sticky booth in a diner that had seen 1,000 similar conversations. Sophie and Chloe had moved on from coloring to building some kind of elaborate structure out of sugar packets. Lily watched them with wide eyes, occasionally shrieking with delight when the structure collapsed. They're good together, Elena observed. Yeah, they are. Chloe doesn't have a lot of friends. We move around too much. Different apartments every time the rent goes up or the landlord decides he can get more money from someone else. That must be hard on her. Everything's hard on her. She's 6. She should be worried about dolls and cartoons, not whether mommy can afford dinner. Mason didn't have a good response to that, so he just listened. I used to be a good mom, Elena continued, her voice distant, before everything fell apart. I used to make pancakes on Saturday mornings and read bedtime stories and take them to the park. Now I'm just trying to keep everyone fed and housed, and I feel like I'm failing at even that. You're not failing. You're surviving. There's a difference. It doesn't feel different. I know. Dolores refilled their coffee without being asked. The diner was filling up now. Families, couples, solo diners reading newspapers. Normal people living normal lives while Mason and Elena sat in their corner booth talking about how to keep breathing when everything hurt. Can I ask you something else? Elena said. Go for it. Why are you really doing this? And don't give me the thing about wanting to live in a better world. I believe that's part of it, but it's not all of it. Mason considered lying, considered deflecting, considered ending the conversation and going home to his penthouse where things were simple and controlled. Instead, he told her the truth. Because 3 months after Olivia died, I went to the grocery store by myself for the first time. And I had a complete breakdown in the cereal aisle because I couldn't remember which kind she used to buy. And it felt like if I picked the wrong one, I was erasing her somehow. And I just stood there crying in front of the Cheerios while people walked past and pretended not to see me. Elena's eyes were wide. And this old woman? I never saw her before, never saw her again. She came up to me and she didn't say anything profound. She just said, "Whatever you're going through, I'm sorry it hurts." That's it. Then she walked away. But it was enough. It was the first time since Olivia died that someone acknowledged I was in pain without trying to fix it or explain it away. He took a breath. When I saw you in that parking lot, I saw me in the cereal aisle. Someone who just needed one person to notice and give a damn. So I noticed, and I gave a damn. That's the whole story. Elena was crying again, not sobbing, just tears tracking silently down her face. That old woman probably saved your life. Probably. And you're trying to pass it forward. Something like that. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand once, briefly. Thank you for noticing. Thank you for letting me help. They finished their pancakes while their daughters built increasingly ambitious sugar packet structures, and Lily drooled happily on everything within reach. It was messy and imperfect, and nothing like Mason's usual carefully controlled life. It was also the best morning he'd had in 3 years. Over the next 2 weeks, Mason found himself in unexpected territory. Elena texted him updates about her new job. Small victories, frustrating moments, questions about office politics. He responded with advice that felt rusty from disuse, his business instincts dusting themselves off after years of autopilot. My supervisor is micromanaging everything. Is that normal? For the first month, yes. Prove you're competent and she'll back off. I fixed a claim error that would have cost the company $30,000. Do I tell someone or just fix it? Document it in an email to your supervisor. Create a paper trail of your value. Someone brought donuts for the whole department and I cried in the bathroom because I can't remember the last time someone did something nice without wanting something. Am I losing it? You're adjusting. Give yourself permission to feel things without analyzing them. Sophie started asking about Chloe with increasing frequency. Can we have them over for dinner? Maybe. Can I send Chloe a letter? If you want to. Can we go back to that diner? Why? Because it's where our friend lives. Friend. Such a simple word for something that felt increasingly complicated. On Friday afternoon, Mason's assistant Karen buzzed him during a meeting. There's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says you know her. Elena Brooks? Mason excused himself from the conference room full of confused executives and found Elena in his reception area, looking wildly out of place in her business casual clothes, clutching a paper bag. Elena? Everything okay? I'm so sorry to just show up. I know you're working and I should have called first, but I was downtown for a meeting and I wanted to bring you something and I thought maybe I could just drop it off, but then your assistant said you were here and Elena, breathe. What is going on? She thrust the paper bag at him. It's not much. It's probably stupid. But you did all this stuff for me and I wanted to do something for you and I don't have a lot of money, but I can cook. And Mason opened the bag. Inside were homemade chocolate chip cookies, still warm, wrapped in aluminum foil. Sophie mentioned you like chocolate chip cookies, Elena said, her words coming faster now. At the diner. She said your wife used to make them and you haven't had them since, and I know mine probably aren't as good, but I thought maybe... She stopped because Mason had gone very still. I'm sorry, she said quickly. That was too much. That was weird and intrusive, and I shouldn't have... They're perfect, Mason said quietly. Thank you. Yeah? Yeah. They stood in his modern, sterile reception area, all glass and steel and expensive art that meant nothing, while Mason held a bag of homemade cookies and tried to remember how to be a person who accepted kindness. Do you want to come in? He heard himself ask. See the office? I don't want to interrupt your... You're not interrupting. Come on. He gave her a quick tour, watching her take in the view, the conference rooms, the casual opulence that came from having more money than sense. She didn't seem impressed so much as overwhelmed. You run all this. I oversee it. A lot of very smart people run the actual day-to-day operations. It's incredible. It's just business. That's easy to say when you have this much of it. Fair point. They ended up in his office. Elena perched nervously on one of his leather chairs, while Mason ate a cookie that tasted nothing like Olivia's and somehow made that okay. These are really good, he said. They're just cookies. They're not just cookies. Elena seemed to understand what he meant. She relaxed slightly, her shoulders dropping from somewhere near her ears. Sophie's a great kid, she said. Chloe talks about her constantly. Can Sophie read yet? Does Sophie like the same TV shows? Does Sophie want to be friends forever? Sophie asked the same questions about Chloe. We should probably let them actually hang out then. Yeah, we probably should. Are you busy tomorrow? We were going to go to this free event at the Children's Museum. Nothing fancy, just like crafts and story time. But if you and Sophie wanted to come... Mason thought about his Saturday plans, conference calls with London, reviewing quarterly reports. Maybe a workout, if he felt motivated. The same things he did every Saturday. The same things he'd been doing for 3 years. What time? He asked. Elena's face lit up. Really? Really. 10 a.m.? We could meet there? We'll be there. After she left, Mason sat in his office eating cookies and staring out at the Chicago skyline and wondering what the hell he was doing. This wasn't a business transaction. This wasn't charity work that came with tax deductions and plaques on walls. This was friendship. Messy, complicated, real friendship with someone whose life was nothing like his. And for the first time in 3 years, that felt okay. More than okay. It felt right. The Children's Museum was chaos in the best possible way. Screaming kids, harried parents, the smell of hand sanitizer and graham crackers. Mason stood in the entrance holding Sophie's hand and seriously reconsidering every decision that had led him here. There they are! Sophie yanked free and ran toward Elena and Chloe before Mason could stop her. The two girls collided in a hug like they'd been separated for years instead of weeks. Lily was strapped to Elena's chest in a carrier that looked homemade, her tiny fists grabbing at her mother's hair. You came, Elena said, looking genuinely surprised. I said I would. I know, but people say things all the time and then something comes up or they forget or... She stopped herself. Sorry, I'm working on not assuming the worst about everything. How's that going? Terrible, but I'm trying. They moved through the museum together, two families that didn't quite match but somehow fit anyway. Sophie and Chloe raced from exhibit to exhibit, while Mason and Elena followed at a slower pace, Lily dozing against her mother's chest. She's sleeping better, Elena said, adjusting the carrier. The doctor said her fever was just a virus, but it was bad enough that if we'd waited much longer... She trailed off, not finishing the thought. Mason didn't need her to finish it. He'd done the math himself that night in the parking lot, calculating how close they'd been to a tragedy that would have made the news for maybe one day before everyone moved on. But she's okay now, he said. Yeah, she's okay now. They watched Sophie teach Chloe how to build a bridge out of foam blocks. Chloe was tentative at first, used to playing alone, but Sophie's enthusiasm was infectious. Within minutes, they were both laughing, their bridge collapsing spectacularly every 30 seconds. Chloe's never had a friend like Sophie, Elena said quietly. Someone who just likes her. No conditions, no complications. Sophie's never had a friend like Chloe either. All her school friends are, Mason searched for the right word, curated. Their parents know my net worth before they know my name. Must be lonely. You have no idea. They found seats on a bench designed for people 6 inches shorter than Mason. He folded himself onto it anyway, his knees practically at his chest. Elena laughed. You look ridiculous. I feel ridiculous. Good. You should feel ridiculous more often. It's humanizing. Lily stirred, made a small sound of protest, then settled back to sleep. Elena stroked her daughter's back with the absent familiarity of a mother who'd done this 1,000 times. Can I ask you something personal? Elena said. Seems to be the theme of our friendship. Is that what this is? Friendship? Mason thought about it. I don't know what else to call it. Charity case and guilty billionaire? If I'm guilty of anything, it's waiting too long to do something that mattered. Elena was quiet for a moment, watching the girls play. Your wife, would she have liked this? Us being friends? The question caught him off guard. Yeah, she would have. Olivia was better at people than I am. She would have had you over for dinner that first week, would have helped you move into a better apartment, would have organized a whole support network before I finished overthinking whether it was appropriate to get involved. She sounds amazing. She was. She was also bossy and stubborn and had terrible taste in movies, but yeah, she was amazing. How did you meet? Mason smiled despite himself. College. She rear-ended my car in the parking lot and then tried to convince me it was my fault for parking in a spot she wanted. Did it work? Completely. I was so flustered by this angry girl yelling at me about parking etiquette that I just agreed to whatever she said. We went to dinner that night to discuss the accident. She never paid for the damage. We got married 3 years later. Elena laughed. That's actually kind of perfect. Yeah, it was. They sat in silence, broken only by the ambient noise of children playing and parents negotiating snack schedules. Mason realized he was more relaxed than he'd been in months, maybe years. There was something about Elena that made pretending unnecessary. I got my first real paycheck yesterday, Elena said eventually. Direct deposit. I checked my bank account like 20 times to make sure it was real. What'd you do with it? Paid rent, bought groceries, got Chloe new shoes that actually fit, took Lily to a real pediatrician instead of the free clinic, put $50 in savings. She paused, and I cried in the bathroom at work because I forgot what it felt like to not be terrified every single day. That's a lot of firsts. Yeah. She turned to look at him. Thank you for all of it. I know I keep saying that, but I don't know what else to say. You don't have to say anything. I do, though, Because you changed my life, and I need you to know that I know that. Mason didn't have a response that felt adequate, so he just nodded. Sophie and Chloe ran over, breathless and excited. Daddy, there's a story time in 5 minutes. Can we go, please? Sure, kiddo. Chloe's coming too. The girls ran off toward the reading area. Elena started to get up, but Mason waved her back down. I've got them. You stay here. Rest. You sure? Positive. Lily's sleeping and you look exhausted. I always look exhausted. Fair point. Stay anyway. He followed the girls to a carpeted area where a cheerful woman in a dinosaur costume was setting up picture books. Sophie and Chloe immediately claimed spots in the front row, sitting so close their shoulders touched. Mason leaned against the wall in the back, watching his daughter interact with the world in a way she hadn't since Olivia died. Sophie had always been friendly, but there was a guardedness to her now, a wariness that came from learning too young that people you loved could disappear without warning. With Chloe, that guardedness vanished. They were just two kids sharing crayons and laughing at dinosaur jokes. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant about a contract negotiation that needed his attention. Then another from his lawyer about a real estate deal. Then a third from his accountant about quarterly taxes. Mason silenced his phone without reading any of them. The storytime lady was reading something about a bear who couldn't find his hat. Sophie and Chloe were completely absorbed. Mason pulled out his phone again, this time opening the camera. He took a picture of the two girls sitting together, heads bent close as they looked at the illustrations. Then he texted it to Elena with the caption, "They're good for each other." Her response came immediately, "Yeah, they really are." When storytime ended, they reconvened at the entrance. Lily was awake now, gnawing on a teething ring and babbling contentedly. "Lunch?" Mason suggested before he could overthink it. Elena hesitated. "We were just going to grab something cheap on the way home." "I'm buying. There's a good burger place 2 blocks from here." "Mason, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to. The girls are having fun. Let's not end it yet." Sophie and Chloe were already holding hands, swinging their arms between them. Elena looked at them, then at Mason, then sighed in defeat. "Okay, but somewhere the girls can be loud. I don't do fancy restaurants where everyone judges my kids. The loudest burger joint in Chicago, I promise." The restaurant was exactly what he'd promised. Sticky tables, screaming children, a jukebox playing classic rock too loud. They crammed into a booth designed for 4 people. Sophie and Chloe squeezed together on one side while Elena juggled Lily and tried to look at the menu simultaneously. "Here." Mason reached for the baby. "Let me take her." Elena looked uncertain. "You don't have to." "Elena, I've held a baby before. Give her here." She passed Lily over carefully, and Mason settled the infant against his shoulder with muscle memory that surprised him. Sophie had been this small once. He'd forgotten how it felt to hold someone who fit in the crook of one arm. Lily stared up at him with huge eyes, then grabbed his nose and squealed with delight. "She likes you," Chloe observed. "I have a very grabbable nose." "That's silly." "Welcome to being an adult. Everything is silly and nothing makes sense," Sophie giggled. Chloe looked confused but smiled anyway. Elena watched him with an expression he couldn't quite read. They ordered an obscene amount of food. Burgers, fries, onion rings, milkshakes. The girls made a mess immediately, ketchup somehow ending up in Chloe's hair within 30 seconds. "I swear I taught her table manners," Elena said, trying to wipe ketchup away with a napkin that disintegrated on contact. "Sophie once ate an entire grilled cheese sandwich with her feet," Mason said. "We were at a business dinner. My competitors brought it up for years." "That's not true," Sophie protested. "It's completely true. You were 3 and you thought it was hilarious." "Mommy, can I eat with my feet?" Chloe asked. "Absolutely not." "But Sophie did it." "Sophie's daddy is a billionaire. She can get away with things you can't." "That's not fair." "Life's not fair, baby. Eat your burger." Mason caught Elena's eye across the table. She was trying not to smile. "Did I just make your life harder?" he asked. "So much harder." "Sorry." "No, you're not." "You're right. I'm not." Lily had fallen asleep again, drooling on Mason's shoulder. He didn't bother wiping it away. Designer suit be damned. Some things mattered more than dry cleaning bills. "You're good with her," Elena said quietly. "I'm out of practice." "Doesn't look like it." Sophie was easier. She slept through the night by 3 months. Olivia swore we'd gotten lucky, and any future kids would be nightmares to balance it out. Were you planning on more? Kids, I mean. Mason looked at Sophie, who was teaching Chloe how to make a face out of French fries. Yeah, we wanted 3, maybe 4. Olivia came from a big family. She hated being an only child. What happened, if you don't mind me asking? Wrong place, wrong time. Drunk driver ran a red light. She was gone before the ambulance arrived. The words came out flat, factual, like he was reading someone else's biography. Sophie was at a sleepover. I was working late. We'd had a fight that morning about something stupid I can't even remember now. The last thing I said to her was, fine, whatever, do what you want. And then she was gone, and those were the last words my wife ever heard from me. Elena's hand found his across the table. Mason, I'm so sorry. Yeah, me too. They sat like that for a moment, hands clasped over sticky table, while the jukebox played and children screamed and life continued on around them like it had every right to keep going even when it felt like it should stop. The first year was the worst, Mason continued. I kept thinking I'd wake up and it would have been a nightmare, or I'd hear her key in the door and realize it was all a mistake. But she stayed gone and I stayed angry and Sophie stayed confused and we've just been fumbling through it ever since. You're doing better than fumbling. Sophie's a great kid. That's in spite of me, not because of me. Her nanny deserves most of the credit. I don't believe that. Believe it. I spent the first year basically catatonic. Work, sleep, repeat. Sophie could have raised herself for all the attention I paid. But you didn't stay that way. I didn't have a choice. Sophie needed a parent, not a ghost. Elena squeezed his hand once more before letting go. For what it's worth, I think you're doing okay now. Thanks. You too. I'm a mess. You're a mess who shows up. That counts for something. The girls had finished their food and were getting restless. Chloe was doing that thing kids do where they start sliding off the booth seat in slow motion, trying to see if gravity works differently this time. We should probably go before they destroy something, Elena said. Probably. Mason paid the bill over Elena's protests. Then they spilled out onto the sidewalk into afternoon sunshine that felt warmer than it should in November. Lily was awake again, content to observe the world from Mason's arms. Where'd you park? He asked Elena. She looked embarrassed. We took the bus. It's cheaper than... I'll drive you home. Mason, you don't have to... Elena, I'm holding your baby and we're 6 miles from your place and my car is right there. Let me drive you home. She looked like she wanted to argue but didn't have the energy. Okay, thank you. The Range Rover was excessive for city driving, but Mason had stopped caring about practicality years ago. He got Lily settled in Sophie's old car seat, which was still in the back because he'd never gotten around to removing it. Elena's neighborhood looked worse in daylight. Buildings with broken windows, empty lots filled with trash, clusters of men on corners who watched the expensive car drive past with expressions ranging from curious to hostile. That one, Elena said, pointing to a 3-story building with peeling paint and a front door that didn't quite close all the way. Mason pulled to the curb. This is home? For now. Rent's cheap and the landlord doesn't ask too many questions. Is it safe? Elena laughed without humor. Define safe. Nobody's tried to break in yet. That's basically all I can ask for. Mason looked at the building, doing calculations in his head he knew he shouldn't be doing. This was already complicated enough without him trying to solve all of Elena's problems at once. Thank you for today, Elena said, unbuckling Lily from the car seat. The girls had fun. So did I. Really? Really, this was the best Saturday I've had in 3 years. Elena smiled, genuine and unguarded. Same. We should do it again sometime. Yeah, we should. Chloe and Sophie were saying goodbye with the intensity of people partying forever instead of just until next week. Can Chloe come to my birthday party? Sophie asked suddenly. Mason blinked. He'd completely forgotten Sophie's birthday was coming up. Please, it's in 2 weeks and we're having it at that place with the trampolines and Chloe would love trampolines, right, Chloe? Chloe nodded vigorously. I've never been on a trampoline. See? She has to come. It's basically required. Elena looked uncomfortable. Sweetheart, I don't know if... You're invited too, Sophie said to Elena. And Lily. Everyone's invited. Right, Daddy? Mason looked at his daughter's hopeful face, then at Elena's uncertain one, then at Chloe practically vibrating with excitement. Everyone's invited, he confirmed. After they drove away, Sophie was quiet for several blocks before speaking. Daddy? Yeah? Chloe's house looks scary. I know. Is she safe there? I think so. Her mom wouldn't stay if it wasn't safe. But you looked worried. Mason glanced at his daughter in the rearview mirror. Too smart, too observant. I was just thinking, he said carefully. About what? About how some people have to work really hard just to have basic things that other people take for granted. That's not fair. No, it's not. Can we help them more? I don't know, Soph. It's complicated. Why is it complicated? Because helping people isn't always simple. Sometimes you think you're helping and you're actually making things worse. Sometimes people don't want help. Sometimes you're overthinking again. Mason laughed despite himself. When did you get so wise? I told you, I was born this way. That night, after Sophie was in bed, Mason sat in his office with a glass of scotch. He wasn't drinking, and his laptop opened to a page he shouldn't be looking at. Apartment listings. 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom places in better neighborhoods. Places with working locks and no broken windows. Places where 6-year-old girls didn't have to worry about whether their home was safe. He knew this was a bad idea. Knew he was crossing lines that should stay firm. Knew that Elena had explicitly said she didn't want charity. But knowing something was a bad idea had never actually stopped him before. His phone rang. Elena's number. Hey, he answered. Everything okay? Yeah, She paused. I wanted to say thank you again for today, for everything. Chloe hasn't stopped talking about Sophie and the museum and the burgers, and she's already planning her outfit for the birthday party even though it's 2 weeks away. Sophie's doing the same thing. Really? She's already written out a list of trampoline activities they're going to do together. It's color-coded. Elena laughed. Of course it is. They talked for another 20 minutes about nothing in particular. Elena's week at work, Sophie's school project, whether Lily was teething or just angry at the world. Easy conversation that shouldn't have been easy given how different their lives were. I should let you go, Elena finally said. I'm sure you have important billionaire things to do. Not really. Most of my important billionaire things are pretty boring. Still, it's late and you probably have an early morning and… Elena. Yeah? I'm glad we're friends. Silence on the other end, then quietly. Yeah, me too. After they hung up, Mason sat in the dark of his office and thought about friendship and boundaries and all the ways this could go wrong. Then he bookmarked 3 apartment listings and told himself he was just keeping his options open, just in case. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of text messages and phone calls and small moments that added up to something Mason didn't want to examine too closely. Elena sent him pictures of Lily, hitting developmental milestones. He sent her restaurant recommendations near her office. Sophie and Chloe started video calling each other to discuss important 8-year-old and 6-year-old business. We're planning the trampoline strategy, Sophie explained when Mason asked what they talked about for 45 minutes. That requires 45 minutes of planning? It's very complicated. You wouldn't understand. Fair enough. The birthday party arrived faster than Mason expected. He'd hired a party planner because he had no idea how to organize a children's birthday party and frankly didn't want to learn. The trampoline place was packed with Sophie's classmates, kids Mason vaguely recognized from school pickup, accompanied by parents who smiled too much and asked too many questions about his business. Elena and her daughters arrived exactly on time, looking nervous and out of place. Chloe wore a dress that was clearly her nicest outfit, already too small in the sleeves. Elena had Lily in a carrier again, the baby's wide eyes taking in all the chaos. You came! Sophie abandoned a group of girls mid-conversation and ran to Chloe. You invited us. I know, but sometimes people invite you to things and don't actually mean it. Chloe's wisdom was depressing for a 6-year-old. I meant it, Sophie said firmly. Come on, I'll show you the trampolines. They disappeared into the main area, leaving Mason alone with Elena, who looked like she wanted to disappear. Too much? Mason asked. A little bit. Sophie's friends are all… She gestured vaguely at the other parents. Very fancy. They're very boring. Stick with me. I'll protect you from conversations about private school admission strategies. Is that really what they talk about? You have no idea. Last year, someone tried to recruit me into a consortium to hire a dedicated admissions consultant for our kids. They were 5. That's insane. That's wealth. Come on, let's get you some cake before the feeding frenzy starts. They found seats away from the main group, Lily content to watch the organized chaos from her mother's lap. The party planner had outdone herself. Decorations, games, a cake that looked like it belonged in a magazine. This is amazing, Elena said, watching Sophie and Chloe bounce together on a massive trampoline. It's excessive. It's both. One of the other mothers approached, Patricia something, whose daughter was in Sophie's class. Mason braced himself. Mason, so lovely to see you, and this must be, She looked at Elena with the kind of smile that was really a question. Elena Brooks, Mason said. Elena, this is Patricia Chen. Her daughter Mia is in Sophie's class. Oh, how nice. Patricia's smile didn't reach her eyes. I don't think I've seen you at any school events. My daughter goes to a different school, Elena said evenly. Oh, well, that's... How do the girls know each other? Mason could see Elena scrambling for an answer that wouldn't reveal the grocery store parking lot story. He jumped in. Family friends, he said smoothly. We've known each other for years. How wonderful. And what do you do, Elena? Medical billing. Oh, how practical. Patricia's eyes had already glazed over. She turned back to Mason. I wanted to ask about the foundation gala next month. Will you be attending? Haven't decided. You should bring a date. It's been long enough, don't you think? Olivia would want you to move on. The temperature dropped about 20 degrees. Mason felt Elena tense beside him. I'll think about it, he said, his voice carefully neutral. Wonderful. Well, I should circulate. Lovely to meet you, Ellen. Elena. Right, of course. After Patricia left, Elena let out a breath. She seems terrible. She's actually worse than that impression suggested. Did she really just tell you that your dead wife would want you to date? Par for the course in this social circle. Your social circle is the worst. You're not wrong. They watched the kids play while conversation swirled around them. Vacation home renovations, luxury car comparisons, boarding school rankings. Mason had spent years in this world and never felt more disconnected from it. Do you ever feel like you're on the wrong planet? Elena asked quietly. Every single day. But this is your world. Doesn't mean it fits. Lily started fussing. Elena bounced her gently, but the fussing escalated to crying. She's probably hungry, Elena said, standing. Is there somewhere I can... There's a quiet room in the back. I'll show you. He led her away from the party noise to a small room the venue used for nursing mothers. Elena settled into a chair, preparing to feed Lily with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this in far worse conditions. I'll give you privacy, Mason said, turning to leave. You don't have to go, unless you want to. He didn't want to. He sat in the chair across from her while she fed Lily, the baby's crying immediately stopping. She's got good lungs, Mason observed. She knows what she wants and she's not afraid to demand it. I should probably be worried about the teenage years. Sophie was the same way. Still is, actually. They fell into comfortable silence. Mason's phone buzzed repeatedly in his pocket. Probably work. Probably something he should check. He ignored it. Can I ask you something? Elena said. Sure. That woman, Patricia. What she said about moving on. Does that bother you? Mason considered the question. Yes and no. Yes, because she has no right to tell me what Olivia would want. No, because she's not entirely wrong. About moving on? About it being time. I've been stuck for 3 years. I know that. Sophie knows that. Probably everyone knows that except me. Grief doesn't have a timeline. No, but at some point, grief becomes an excuse not to live. Elena looked at him with understanding that came from her own experience with loss. Have you dated anyone since? No, can't imagine it. The thought of explaining everything to someone new, of going through all the getting to know you bullshit when I already found the person I was supposed to be with. He trailed off. It feels pointless. Yeah, I get that. Have you dated? Elena laughed without humor. When? Between working full-time and taking care of two kids and trying to keep us housed and fed? Plus, trusting men isn't really my strong suit right now. Because of Chloe's dad? Because of every man I've ever trusted. My dad left when I was 10. Chloe's dad left when I needed him most. My boss at my old job promised me job security right before laying me off. I've learned my lesson. Not all men are like that. I know. Logically, I know that. But logic and trust are different things. Lily had finished eating and was drowsing against Elena's shoulder. Mason watched them together, this exhausted mother and her content baby, and felt something shift in his chest. "You're a good mom," he said. Elena looked surprised. "I'm a mess." "You're a mess who shows up. That's the definition of a good parent. Is that what you tell yourself? Every single day." They returned to the party to find Sophie and Chloe had organized the other kids into some kind of elaborate trampoline game that involved a lot of screaming and questionable physics. "Should we be worried?" Elena asked. "Probably. But they look happy." "Fair point." The party wound down eventually. Parents collected their sugar-high children, thanking Mason with the same practiced politeness they used for everything. Patricia made sure to corner him one more time. "Think about the gala," she said, "and about what I said. Life's too short to stay stuck in the past." After she left, Elena appeared at his elbow. "I'm starting to think she might be evil." "Starting to?" They helped clean up while Sophie and Chloe extracted every last minute of playtime. When Elena finally announced they needed to leave, Chloe looked devastated. "Can Sophie come to my place next time?" she asked. Elena looked uncomfortable. "Sweetheart, I don't think—" "I'd love to," Sophie said before anyone could stop her. "When can I come over?" "Sophie," that Mason said carefully. "Maybe we should check calendars and next weekend?" Chloe looked at her mother with hopeful eyes. Elena glanced at Mason, her expression clearly saying, "Please help me." "How about this?" Mason said. "Why don't you all come to our place next weekend instead? More space for the girls to play, plus we have a better view." Relief flooded Elena's face. "That sounds great, if you're sure." "I'm sure." In the parking lot, while the girls said yet another prolonged goodbye, Elena turned to Mason. "Thank you for today, for inviting us, for making Chloe feel included, for not making me feel like what? Like charity. You make it feel like friendship instead of pity." "That's because it is friendship." "Is it though? Really? Or are you just a nice guy who feels bad for the struggling single mom?" Mason thought about lying, about giving her the easy answer, but they'd gone past easy answers weeks ago. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe it started as guilt or obligation or whatever, but it's not that anymore. You're funny and smart, and you don't take my shit, and you make me feel like a person instead of a bank account." Sophie's happier than she's been in years. I'm happier than I've been in years. So yeah, I think it's really friendship. Elena's eyes were shining. "Okay, good. Because I like being your friend, even though you're absurdly rich and out of touch with reality." "I'm working on the out-of-touch part. Work harder." They stood in the parking lot while their daughters finally, reluctantly separated. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed too beautiful for a random Saturday in November. "See you next weekend," Elena said. "See you next weekend." Mason watched them drive away in that death trap car held together by hope and expired registration. Then he pulled out his phone and sent a text to his real estate contact. "I need information on available apartments. 2-bedroom minimum, good neighborhood, reasonable rent. Discreetly." The response came immediately. "For who?" Mason stared at the question for a long moment before answering. "For a friend." The apartment listings haunted Mason for 3 days before he did anything about them. He'd open the files, stare at photos of clean buildings with functional heating and doors that actually locked, then close his laptop and tell himself this was none of his business. On Wednesday, his real estate contact called with options. "Found 5 potentials," Sarah said. 2-bedroom, good neighborhoods within your specified budget. When do you want to view them?" "I don't. Just send me the information." "Mason, you know I don't work like that. You need to see places before—" "Sarah, just send me the listings. I'll handle it from there." A pause. "This is for the single mom, isn't it? The one you asked about last month?" "I didn't ask about anyone last month." "You did. You called me at 11 p.m. asking about affordable housing resources and then pretended it was for a foundation project. Mason had forgotten that Sarah had known him since college. She remembered things. Just send the listings, he said. Are you going to tell her you're doing this? There's nothing to tell yet. Mason. What? Don't be an idiot about this. What's that supposed to mean? It means I've known you for 15 years and I've watched you try to solve problems by throwing money at them, and it never works the way you think it will. I'm not throwing money at anything. I'm just gathering information. Sure. And I'm the Queen of England. After they hung up, Mason stared at his phone and wondered if Sarah was right. Wondered if he was about to make everything more complicated. Wondered if he should just leave well enough alone. Then Elena texted him a picture of Lily grabbing her own toes with a caption, "She discovered feet. This has been her entire personality for 2 hours." Mason smiled despite himself and put the apartment listings in a folder labeled "Maybe Later." Saturday arrived with the kind of cold that made Chicago feel personally vindictive. Mason cleaned his penthouse with an intensity that would have alarmed his housekeeper, moving furniture and reorganizing shelves like Elena was coming to inspect rather than just hang out. "Why are you being weird?" Sophie asked, watching him rearrange throw pillows for the 3rd time. "I'm not being weird. You alphabetized the books." "I always alphabetize the books." "No, you don't. Mrs. Chen alphabetizes the books. You just throw them wherever." "I'm turning over a new leaf." "You're being weird because Elena's coming." Mason stopped mid-pillow fluff. "What makes you say that?" "Because you never care about the house being clean, and now you're acting like the president is visiting. I just want things to look nice. For Elena. For our guests." "Who are Elena and her daughters?" "Go do your homework." "It's Saturday." "Then go do something else that's not psychoanalyzing your father." Sophie grinned and wandered off, leaving Mason alone with his perfectly arranged throw pillows and the uncomfortable realization that his 8-year-old had him completely figured out. They arrived at 2, Elena looking around the penthouse lobby with obvious discomfort, while Chloe pressed her face against every reflective surface, and Lily drooled on everything within reach. "This is where you live?" Elena said when Mason met them at the elevator. "Yeah, is it too much?" "It's a lot much." "I can tone it down." "How do you tone down a lobby that has a chandelier and a doorman?" "I'll work on it." The elevator ride to the top floor was silent except for Lily's babbling and Chloe's whispered commentary on everything she saw. When the doors opened directly into Mason's penthouse, Elena actually laughed. Of course your elevator opens into your apartment. Why would you have a hallway like a normal person?" "I can explain the real estate logic." "Please don't. I'm still processing the chandelier." Sophie appeared and immediately dragged Chloe away to see her room. Their excited chatter faded down the hallway, leaving Mason and Elena standing awkwardly in the entryway. "Your home is beautiful," Elena said, and it sounded like an accusation. "Thank you. I mean, it's a lot to take in. The view alone probably costs more per month than my entire rent." Mason looked at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago, suddenly seeing them through her eyes. "I know it's excessive." "It's not excessive. It's just different, really, really different from my world." "Does that bother you?" Elena shifted Lily to her other hip. "I don't know yet. Ask me again in an hour." They settled into the living room, Lily immediately grabbing at a throw pillow that probably cost more than Elena's couch. Mason didn't stop her. "Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? I have juice boxes for the kids." "You have juice boxes?" "I had my assistant stock the fridge. There's also string cheese and those little crackers shaped like fish." Elena's expression softened. "You bought goldfish crackers." "Was that wrong?" "No, it's perfect. It's just, you didn't have to do that. I wanted the girls to feel comfortable. They're 6 and 8. They'd be comfortable anywhere with a flat surface to make a mess on." "Fair point." Lily had moved on from the pillow to Mason's watch, tiny fingers trying to pry it off his wrist. Elena started to intervene, but Mason waved her off. "She's fine. It's just a watch." "It's a Rolex." "It's just a fancy watch. That costs more than my car." "Your car costs like $800. Exactly my point." They fell into the kind of bickering that felt comfortable, familiar. Mason realized he was smiling. "What?" Elena asked. "Nothing. Just This is nice. Having people here? When was the last time you had people over? Mason thought about it. Olivia's funeral, 3 years ago. That's depressing. Yeah, it really is. Sophie and Chloe thundered back into the room, breathless and excited. Daddy, can we show Chloe the roof? Mason had forgotten about the roof access. It's freezing outside. We'll wear coats, please? Chloe's never seen the city from up high. He looked at Elena, who shrugged. If it's safe. It's safe. Just cold. They bundled the girls into coats and headed up the private staircase to the rooftop terrace. The wind hit them like a wall, but the view was worth it. Chicago spread out in every direction, the lake gray and choppy in the distance. Chloe stood at the railing with her mouth open. Is this real? Very real, Sophie said proudly. We can see everything from up here. I've never been this high up except in a plane. It's pretty cool, right? It's the coolest thing ever. Mason stood next to Elena, both of them watching the girls point at buildings and try to spot landmarks. Thank you for this, Elena said quietly, for letting her experience something she'd never get to otherwise. It's just a roof. It's not just a roof. It's a memory she'll have forever. They stayed up there until the cold became unbearable, then retreated back to the warmth of the penthouse. Mason ordered pizza, fancy pizza from a place that used truffle oil and imported mozzarella, but still pizza. You can't just order normal pizza like a regular person, Elena teased. I tried once. The place I usually order from acted personally offended. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. Welcome to my life. They ate on the living room floor because Chloe had never eaten on the floor before, and Sophie insisted it was a crucial life experience. Lily sat in Elena's lap, grabbing at pizza crusts and shrieking with delight every time Sophie made faces at her. This is nice, Elena said, watching the girls share slices and argue about which pizza topping was superior. Yeah, it is. Do you ever miss it, having a full house like this? Mason looked around at the mess they'd made. Pizza boxes, scattered toys, juice boxes creating water rings on his expensive coffee table. I didn't know I missed it until right now. Careful, we might have to make this a regular thing. I wouldn't hate that. Elena met his eyes, and something passed between them. Not quite romantic, not quite platonic, something undefined that made Mason's chest tight. After dinner, the girls insisted on a movie. They piled onto the couch together, Sophie and Chloe sandwiched between Mason and Elena, with Lily sprawled across her mother's lap. The movie was some animated thing about talking animals that Mason had seen a dozen times with Sophie but never really watched. Halfway through, he noticed Elena had fallen asleep, her head tilted back against the couch, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Lily had also dozed off, tiny snores making her chest rise and fall. The girls were absorbed in the movie, occasionally whispering commentary to each other. Mason pulled out his phone carefully and took a picture. Not of Elena, exactly, but of the whole scene. His living room full of people for the first time in 3 years. Evidence that life could be something other than empty. Elena stirred, blinking awake. Did I fall asleep? For about 20 minutes. I'm so sorry, that's so rude. You're exhausted. It's fine. It's not fine. I'm a guest in your house and Elena, stop. You're safe here. If you need to sleep, sleep. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Why are you so nice to me? Why wouldn't I be? Because most people aren't. Because I'm a mess and I have nothing to offer you and this whole thing doesn't make sense. Mason kept his voice low so the girls wouldn't hear. What doesn't make sense about two people being friends? Everything. We're from completely different worlds. You live in a penthouse and I live in a building where the heat only works half the time. You have a personal assistant and I have a neighbor who sometimes watches my kids if I bribe her with cigarettes. You donate more to charity in a year than I'll make in my lifetime. This shouldn't work. But it does work. Does it? Really? Or are you just slumming it with the poor people to feel better about yourself? The words hung in the air between them. Mason felt like he'd been slapped. Is that really what you think? He asked quietly. Elena looked away. I don't know what I think. I'm sorry. That was mean. It was honest. Honest and mean aren't mutually exclusive. No, they're not. They sat in silence while the movie played on, the girls oblivious to the tension crackling between the adults. Finally, Elena spoke again. I'm scared. Of what? Of getting used to this. To you. To Sophie. To having people who give a damn. Because what happens when it ends? When you get bored or realize how much work it is to be friends with someone who has actual problems. When Sophie moves on to other friends and Chloe's left behind again. That's not going to happen. You can't promise that. You're right, I can't. But I can promise I'm not doing this to make myself feel better. I'm doing this because you and your daughters make my life better. Because Sophie smiles more. Because I remember what it feels like to care about something other than quarterly earnings. Because when I'm with you, I don't have to pretend to be anything other than exactly who I am. Elena was crying silently now, tears tracking down her face. This is terrifying. What is? Letting myself believe you. Letting myself hope this is real. Mason reached over and took her hand. It's real, Elena. I promise it's real. The movie ended. The girls immediately demanded another one. Elena wiped her face and nodded, and they started a second movie neither adult paid any attention to. Somewhere during the opening credits, Elena's head found its way to Mason's shoulder. He didn't move, didn't acknowledge it, just sat there on his expensive couch in his excessive penthouse and let himself be exactly where he was. When the second movie ended, it was dark outside. The girls were drowsy, that post-sugar crash that made children move in slow motion. We should go, Elena said, not moving. You could stay, Mason heard himself say. What? I have guest rooms, plural. You're tired. The girls are tired. It's a long bus ride home in the dark. Elena sat up, putting distance between them. Mason, I can't. I'm not suggesting anything weird. I'm suggesting practical logistics. You stay in one guest room. The girls stay in another. I stay in my room. Everyone gets actual sleep instead of you dragging 2 kids across Chicago at 9 p.m. That's too much. It's bedrooms that are sitting empty anyway. People will talk. Let them talk. I stopped caring what people think about 3 years ago. Elena looked at Chloe, who was practically asleep on Sophie's shoulder. Looked at Lily, who was dead to the world. Looked at the windows showing nothing but darkness and city lights. Okay, she said finally. But just tonight, and we're leaving first thing in the morning. Deal. Mason set them up in 2 adjoining guest rooms that had never been used. Found extra toothbrushes and pajamas. Sophie's old ones that still had tags on them for the girls. One of his old t-shirts for Elena that swallowed her completely. This is surreal, Elena said, standing in a bedroom that was bigger than her entire apartment. Is it too much? Everything about you is too much. I'm getting used to it. That's progress, I think. Or Stockholm Syndrome. Let's go with progress. After the girls were settled and Elena had retreated to her room, Mason stood in his own bedroom and tried to process what he'd just done. Invited Elena and her daughters to stay over. Crossed another line in a relationship that kept refusing to stay neatly defined. His phone buzzed, a text from Elena. Thank you for everything, for today, for being patient with me, for not giving up when I'm difficult. He typed back, You're not difficult, you're careful, there's a difference. Her response came quickly. I'm trying to figure out how to be both careful and trusting at the same time. Let me know when you figure it out. I'm working on the same thing. Mason fell asleep that night with people in his house for the first time in 3 years and woke up to the sound of children laughing in his kitchen. He found all 4 of them in there. Sophie showing Chloe how to make cinnamon toast, Elena trying to stop Lily from grabbing the butter knife, everyone still in pajamas and looking completely at home in his space. Good morning, he said from the doorway. 4 faces turned toward him. Sophie grinned. Chloe waved shyly. Lily shrieked and threw a piece of toast at him. Elena just looked embarrassed. I told them to be quiet so you could sleep. It's fine. This is better than quiet. We're making breakfast, Sophie announced. We're trying to. Your kitchen is weird. How is my kitchen weird? Everything is too high and too fancy. Normal people don't have 6 different kinds of knives. Those are for different... Mason stopped himself. Never mind. Carry on. They ate breakfast together at the kitchen island, Lily creating modern art with mashed banana on the counter. It was chaotic and messy, and nothing like Mason's usual quiet mornings alone with coffee and the Wall Street Journal. He loved every second of it. We really should go, Elena said eventually, though she made no move to gather their things. Why? Because we've imposed enough. Because you probably have work. Because it's Sunday. I don't have work, and you're not imposing. Mason, stay for lunch. The girls are having fun. You actually got some sleep. What's the rush? Elena looked at him for a long moment. You're making this really hard. Making what hard? Keeping appropriate boundaries. Maybe the boundaries are in the wrong place. Or maybe they're exactly where they need to be and you're just ignoring them. That's possible too. They ended up staying until dinner. The day dissolved into the kind of unstructured time that only happened when you stopped trying to control everything. The girls playing elaborate games that made no sense to adults. Lily napping while Elena actually relaxed for once. Mason ordering takeout from 3 different restaurants because he couldn't decide what everyone would like. This is ridiculous, Elena said, looking at the spread of Thai food, Italian food, and burgers. This is enough food for 12 people. We'll have leftovers. We'll have leftovers for a week. Then take them home with you. Mason, Elena, please, just take the leftovers. Let me do this one small thing. She looked at him with exasperation and affection in equal measure. Nothing about you is small. I'm working on it. After they finally left, laden with leftovers and tired children and promises to do this again soon, Mason stood in his suddenly empty penthouse and felt the silence settle around him like a physical weight. His phone rang. Richard Chen. Did you have a nice weekend? Richard asked without preamble. How did you... Your doorman is married to my wife's sister. Chicago is a very small town when you're rich. Mason sighed. What did he tell her? That you had a woman and 2 children spend the night, that you looked happier than anyone's seen you in years, that he's starting an office pool about when you'll make it official. There's nothing to make official. We're friends. Mason, I've known you since business school. I've never seen you be just friends with a woman. Well, I am now. Does she know that? Know what? That you're falling for her. Mason opened his mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. It's not like that. Sure it's not. Look, I'm not judging. Elena's great. She's doing excellent work here, by the way. Her supervisor loves her, but you need to be honest with yourself about what this is. It's friendship. Friendship doesn't make you clean your apartment and buy goldfish crackers and invite people to stay over. How do you know about the goldfish crackers? The doorman is very thorough in his reporting. After they hung up, Mason poured himself a drink and stood at his windows looking out at the city. Thought about Elena and her daughters asleep in his guest rooms. Thought about Sophie happier than she'd been in years. Thought about what Richard had said and whether there was any truth to it. He wasn't falling for Elena. He was just enjoying her company, helping a friend, making sure her daughters were safe and fed and happy. That's all it was. That's all it could be. But when he closed his eyes, he could still feel the weight of her head on his shoulder, could still hear her laugh at something ridiculous Lily had done, could still see the way she looked at him like he was just Mason instead of Mason Carter, billionaire tech mogul. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice that sounded suspiciously like Olivia whispered, "Stop overthinking and just feel what you're feeling." Mason finished his drink and went to bed, where he dreamed of breakfast chaos and children's laughter and Elena smiling at him across a table covered in too much food. The next morning, he opened the folder labeled Maybe Later and started seriously looking at apartment listings, not because he was falling for her, just because he cared. There was a difference. He was pretty sure there was a difference. The apartment decision crystallized on a Tuesday afternoon when Elena called him from a police station. "I'm fine," she said immediately, her voice shaking. "We're fine. But there was a break-in at our building, and the police are interviewing everyone, and I can't get Chloe to stop crying, and Lily won't stop screaming, and I don't know what to do." Mason was in a board meeting. He stood up without excusing himself. "Where are you?" "District 12 station on Roosevelt, but you don't have to." "I'm already on my way." He made it there in 15 minutes, probably broke several traffic laws, didn't care. Found Elena in the waiting area with both girls, Chloe's face buried in her mother's shoulder, while Lily wailed loud enough to make everyone in the station wince. "What happened?" Mason asked, sitting down next to them. Elena's eyes were red. "Someone broke into the apartment downstairs. Mrs. Rodriguez, she's elderly, she was home. They hurt her pretty badly. The girls heard everything, the screaming, the sirens, everything." Chloe lifted her head. "She gonna die?" "No, baby. She's going to be okay." "You don't know that." You're right, I don't. But the doctors are helping her. Mason looked at Elena. What did the police say about your apartment? That we're lucky we weren't home. That the building isn't safe, that I should find somewhere else to stay. She laughed without humor. Like I can just magic up a new apartment. You can stay with us. The words were out before Mason could stop them. Elena stared at him. What? You and the girls stay at my place, just temporarily, until you find somewhere better. Mason, that's insane. What's insane is you staying in a building where someone just got assaulted. I can't just move into your penthouse. Why not? Because, Elena gestured helplessly. Because of 1,000 reasons. Because it's inappropriate. Because people will talk. Because I'm not a charity case you can just fix by throwing housing at me. This isn't about charity. This is about keeping you safe. It's too much. It's spare bedrooms I'm not using. A police officer approached, notepad in hand. Mrs. Brooks, we need to ask you a few more questions. Elena handed Lily to Mason and followed the officer to a desk. Lily immediately stopped crying, fascinated by Mason's tie. Chloe stayed curled into herself, small and scared. Hey, Mason said gently, you okay? Chloe shook her head. That's fair. This was scary. I don't want to go home. You don't have to, not tonight. Mommy says we don't have anywhere else to go. You have us. You have Sophie and me, always. Chloe looked up at him with Olivia's eyes, that particular shade of desperate hope mixed with fear of disappointment. You mean it? I mean it. When Elena finished with the police, Mason didn't give her room to argue. He drove them to their building, stood guard while Elena packed bags with shaking hands, helped carry everything down to his car, while trying not to look at the blood still visible on the hallway floor. This is temporary, Elena said for the 3rd time as they drove to his penthouse. Just until I find something else. Sure, temporary. I mean it, Mason. I know you do. Sophie was ecstatic when they arrived, immediately claiming Chloe for an emergency sleepover in her room. Elena collapsed onto Mason's couch, like someone had cut her strings. I can't do this, she said quietly. Do what? Any of this. Keep pretending I have everything under control. Keep accepting your help like I'm not completely dependent on you. Keep lying to myself that this is normal. Mason sat down next to her, keeping a careful distance. What would normal look like? I don't know anymore. I used to have a plan. Used to think if I just worked hard enough, saved enough, did everything right, we'd be okay. But it doesn't matter how hard I work. Something always goes wrong. The car breaks down, Lily gets sick, someone breaks into our building. I'm one disaster away from homelessness at all times, and I'm so tired of being scared. So stop being scared, Elena laughed bitterly. That easy, huh? No. But you don't have to be scared alone. You have people now. You have me and Sophie. You have Richard and your coworkers. You have resources you didn't have 6 months ago. Resources I only have because you gave them to me. So what? Does that make them less real? Elena covered her face with her hands. I don't know how to do this. How to need people. How to accept help without feeling like I'm failing. Needing help isn't failing. It's being human. Easy for you to say. You've never needed anything from anyone. Mason thought about the year after Olivia died. The nights he couldn't get out of bed. The days Sophie's nanny basically raised his daughter while he pretended to function. The standing prescription for anxiety medication he never admitted to anyone. You're wrong, he said quietly. I've needed plenty. I just had enough money to hide it. Elena lowered her hands. What did you need? Someone to tell me it was okay that I couldn't fix everything. Someone to make me leave the house. Someone to remind me Sophie needed a father, not a ghost. I got lucky. I had people who pushed through my walls, but I needed them desperately. And now? Now I need you to stop fighting this. Stop trying to do everything alone. Stop treating friendship like a transaction that has to be perfectly balanced. That's not what I'm doing. It's exactly what you're doing. You keep a running tally of every dollar I spend, every favor I do, like you're planning to pay it all back someday. But that's not how this works. I help you because I can. You help me by letting Sophie be happy, by making me remember what it feels like to care about something beyond spreadsheets, by being honest when everyone else just tells me what they think I want to hear. Elena was crying again, silent tears that tracked down her face. This is still temporary. Okay? I'm serious. I'm going to find my own place. I believe you. Good. Because I am. I'm not going to be the struggling single mom you rescued forever. You were never someone I rescued. You're someone I noticed. There's a difference. The next morning, Mason made calls. Not to real estate agents this time, to lawyers. He wanted Elena's apartment lease reviewed, wanted to know her legal options, wanted to make sure her security deposit got returned and her landlord couldn't screw her over on the way out. Sarah called him during breakfast. Found 3 new options, better neighborhoods, better buildings. When does she want to start viewing them? Send me the information first. I'll talk to her. Mason, at some point you need to stop managing this woman's life and let her make her own decisions. I'm not managing her life. You're paying lawyers to review her lease and lining up apartments and making decisions about what information she gets when. That's managing. I'm helping. There's a line. You're tap dancing on it. After they hung up, Mason stared at his phone and wondered if Sarah was right. Wondered if he was helping or controlling. Wondered where the boundary was supposed to be. Elena found him on the roof, which had become his thinking spot since she'd mentioned never being up high before. The girls are watching a movie, she said, sitting down next to him on the bench he'd had installed specifically so Sophie could watch the sunset. I needed air. It's 20 degrees. I needed cold air. They sat in silence for a while, watching the city wake up below them. I got promoted, Elena said eventually. Mason turned to look at her. What? At work. My supervisor called this morning. They're moving me to a senior billing specialist position. 20% raise, better hours. It's really good. Elena, that's amazing. It's because of you. Because Richard told them to pay attention to me. It's because you're excellent at your job. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Richard wouldn't promote someone just because I asked him to. He's too competitive for that. If he's promoting you, it's because you're making his company better. Elena pulled her jacket tighter. I saw the apartment listings. Mason's stomach dropped. What? On your laptop, this morning. You left it open and I was looking for the weather and I saw the folder. Options for Elena. 20 different apartments, all organized by price and location and distance from my work. I can explain. You've been apartment hunting for me. I was just gathering information. I wasn't going to do anything without talking to you first. But you were planning to talk to me about it, to show me these places and help me decide and probably offer to cover first month's rent or the security deposit or whatever because that's what you do. You fix things. Mason couldn't tell if she was angry or something else. Is that bad? Elena was quiet for a long moment. No, it's not bad. It's overwhelming and slightly controlling and very you, but it's not bad. I overstepped. Yeah, you did. But I'm starting to think that's just who you are. You see a problem and you solve it. You see someone struggling and you help. You can't turn it off. I can try. Don't. Elena turned to look at him. Don't try to be less than you are just because it makes me uncomfortable. I need to get better at accepting help, not make you worse at giving it. That's very mature. Don't sound so surprised. I can do mature when I'm not having a panic attack. Fair enough. Elena pulled out her phone, opened something, and handed it to him. A bank statement. 3 months ago, I had $63 in savings, she said. Today, I have $4,218. That's after rent and groceries and Lily's doctor visits and new shoes for Chloe and everything else. That's actual savings that I didn't have to touch. Mason looked at the numbers, feeling something tight in his chest. I did that, Elena continued, because you gave me a chance, yeah, but also because I worked my ass off, because I'm good at my job, because I showed up every day and proved I deserved to be there. So when you look at me, I need you to stop seeing someone who needs saving. I need you to see someone who's building something. I do see that. Do you? Or do you see a project, a good deed, the struggling single mom you can feel good about helping? Mason thought about how to answer honestly. 6 months ago? Maybe that's all I saw. But now? Now I see someone who makes me want to be better. Someone who calls me on my bullshit. Someone who's funny and smart and strong as hell. Someone whose daughters make my daughter happier than I've seen her in years. Someone I can't imagine not having in my life. Elena's eyes were wet. That's a lot. It's the truth. What happens when it stops being enough? When you realize how much work it is to be my friend? When the novelty wears off? Elena, look at me. Mason waited until she met his eyes. I lost my wife 3 years ago. I know what it feels like when someone you love disappears. I know what that hole looks like. And I'm not going to create that hole for you or your daughters. If I'm in, I'm in. All the way. For as long as you'll let me be. That sounds like more than friendship. Maybe it is. I don't know. I haven't figured that part out yet. Me neither. They sat with that admission. Two people who'd been broken in different ways, trying to figure out if they could build something together without destroying what they'd already created. Can I show you the apartments? Mason asked eventually. Not to pressure you, just so you have options. Elena smiled. Yeah, you can show me the apartments. Over the next week, they looked at 6 different places. Elena had opinions about all of them. Too far from Chloe's school, too expensive even with the raise, too small for 2 growing kids, weird kitchen layout, suspicious stain on the ceiling. The 7th apartment was different. 2nd floor of a well-maintained building in a good neighborhood. 2 bedrooms, updated kitchen, laundry in the unit, a small balcony that overlooked a park. The landlord was a retired teacher who asked more questions about Chloe's reading level than about Elena's credit score. I like it, Elena said, walking through for the 3rd time. It feels safe. It's a good building. I had my security consultant check it out. You have a security consultant? I have consultants for everything. It's a rich person disease. Must be hard having too many consultants. You have no idea the burden I carry. Elena laughed, and Mason realized he'd memorized that sound. Knew the difference between her polite laugh and her real one. Knew what made her actually happy versus what made her pretend to be. I can afford this, Elena said, looking at the rental paperwork. Not easily, but I can do it, especially with the promotion. I could help with, no, this one I need to do myself. Let me have this. Mason understood. Okay, but if something comes up, I'll figure it out. And if I can't figure it out, then I'll ask for help. Deal? Deal. Elena moved into her new apartment 3 weeks later. Mason hired movers despite her protests, helped her set up furniture she'd bought herself with her own money, watched her hang curtains with the fierce independence of someone reclaiming her life. Sophie and Chloe were devastated to not be living together anymore, but adjusted quickly when they realized they could still have sleepovers. Mason and Elena fell into a routine. Dinners twice a week, weekend outings, spontaneous phone calls about nothing in particular. We're like a family, Sophie observed one night after Elena and the girls had left. We're friends, Mason corrected. Friends don't look at each other the way you and Elena look at each other. How do we look at each other? Like you're both scared of something but you don't know what. Mason stared at his daughter. When did you get so perceptive? I've always been perceptive. You just weren't paying attention. She wasn't wrong. The shift happened on a random Thursday. Mason was working late when Elena texted, Emergency, can you get Sophie? I'm stuck at work and my neighbor can't watch the girls, and I don't know who else to call. He was there in 20 minutes, collecting Sophie from aftercare and driving to Elena's new apartment where Chloe and Lily were with a neighbor who looked relieved to hand them over. Elena said you'd pay me for watching them, the neighbor said. Mason gave her $200 and didn't argue when she looked surprised. He ordered pizza, supervised homework, gave Lily a bottle, and managed to keep 3 kids alive until Elena stumbled through the door at 9 p.m. looking destroyed. I'm so sorry. There was a crisis with a major account and I couldn't leave and my phone died and... She stopped, looking around at the scene. Clean dishes in the drying rack. Homework spread on the table. All 3 kids in pajamas watching a movie. You did bedtime? I remembered how. Elena sank onto the couch next to him. Thank you. I was panicking the whole drive home. They're fine. You're fine. Crisis averted. I hate that I had to call you. I don't. I'm glad you called. Elena leaned her head on his shoulder, exactly like she had months ago in his penthouse. But this time it felt different. Less like seeking comfort and more like coming home. I'm really tired of fighting this, she said quietly. Fighting what? Whatever this is. Us. I keep telling myself we're just friends, but friends don't feel like this. Friends don't make my heart race when they text. Friends don't make me want to be better and scarier and more complicated all at once. Mason's heart was pounding. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't know what I'm saying. I'm saying I'm terrified. I'm saying I think I might be falling for you, and that's the stupidest thing I could possibly do because we're from different worlds and this could never work, and I'd be risking everything we've built, and… Mason kissed her. It was brief, tentative, a question more than a statement. When he pulled back, Elena's eyes were wide. Oh, she said. Yeah. Oh, how long have you… Months. Maybe since the beginning. I don't know. We can't do this. I know. The girls… I know. Everything we've built, Elena, I know. I know all the reasons this is a bad idea, but I'm tired of pretending I don't feel what I feel. I'm tired of calling you my friend when every time I see you I want to kiss you. I'm tired of lying to myself about what this is. Elena was crying, laughing, possibly having a breakdown. This is insane. Completely insane. We're going to screw this up. Probably. The girls are going to get hurt. We won't let them. You can't promise that. You're right, I can't. But I can promise I'll try. I can promise that if we do this, I'm all in. No half measures, no backing out when it gets hard. Elena kissed him this time, harder, desperate. 3 years of loneliness and fear and hope crashing together all at once. Okay, she whispered against his mouth. Okay, let's be insane together. They told the girls the next day, both of them nervous as teenagers. Sophie's reaction was immediate. Finally, I've been waiting forever for you two to figure this out. Chloe just looked confused. So does this mean Sophie's my sister now? Not technically, Elena started. But basically, yes, Sophie finished. We're taking this slow, Mason said. Figuring things out. Nothing has to change right away. But you love each other, right? Chloe asked with the blunt directness of 6-year-olds. Mason looked at Elena. Elena looked at him. Yeah, they said together. It wasn't perfect. They fought about money, about boundaries, about how much help was too much help. Elena had moments where she tried to push Mason away, convinced this couldn't last. Mason had moments where he retreated into work, scared of losing someone else he loved. But they kept showing up, kept choosing each other, kept building something neither of them had planned but both of them needed. 8 months later, Mason proposed in the same grocery store parking lot where they'd first met. It was snowing and ridiculous, and Elena cried while simultaneously calling him an idiot. This is where you first helped us, she said, looking around at the familiar lot. This is where you let me, Mason corrected. You could have told me to go to hell that day. You could have been too proud to accept help, but you weren't. You let me see you, and that changed everything. I was desperate. You were brave. You're still brave. I'm really not. You're the bravest person I know. You survived things that would have destroyed me. You built a life out of nothing. You let yourself trust again when you had every reason not to. You let your daughters hope. That's not just brave, Elena. That's extraordinary. She said yes with mascara running down her face and snow in her hair, and 2 daughters watching from inside the warm car. They got married 6 months later in a small ceremony with just family and close friends. Sophie and Chloe were joint maids of honor and spent most of the ceremony whispering and giggling. Lily threw flowers everywhere except where they were supposed to go. It was messy and imperfect and absolutely right. Years later, when people asked how they met, Mason would tell the grocery store story. About a mother trying to feed her children. About a man who'd forgotten how to see people beyond spreadsheets. About one moment of noticing that changed 4 lives forever. What he didn't tell them was the harder truth, that helping someone isn't about the money you give or the doors you open. It's about seeing someone in their worst moment and choosing to stand there with them. It's about building bridges instead of walls. It's about understanding that everyone is one disaster away from needing help and one act of kindness away from hope. Mason learned that wealth wasn't about how much money you had. It was about what you did when you had enough. Whether you looked away from suffering or toward it. Whether you used your resources to build walls or bridges. Elena learned that accepting help wasn't weakness, that being vulnerable was strength, that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was let someone care about you. Sophie and Chloe learned that family wasn't just about blood, that love was a choice you made every day, that the world could be cruel, but it could also be kind if you paid attention to the right things. And Lily, who would grow up hearing the story of how a stranger became her father, learned that sometimes the most important moments in life look ordinary, that change doesn't always announce itself, that kindness ripples outward in ways you can't predict or control. On their 5th anniversary, Elena and Mason returned to that grocery store. It had been renovated, modernized, barely recognizable, but they stood in the parking lot anyway, holding hands, remembering. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd looked away that day?" Elena asked. "Every day. And then I stopped thinking about it because I didn't look away. I looked at you, and that made all the difference." That's very poetic for someone who claims not to be romantic. You bring it out in me. I bring out a lot of things in you: poetry, patience, a decent sense of fashion. I had a decent sense of fashion before you. You wore the same suit to every meeting for 2 years. It was a good suit. It was boring. I made you interesting. You made me human. Elena squeezed his hand. We made each other better. That's how it works. They drove home together, to the house they'd bought in a neighborhood that was neither his world nor hers, but somehow became theirs, where Sophie and Chloe shared a room by choice, despite having their own spaces, where Lily's artwork covered the refrigerator, where Mason's expensive furniture mixed with Elena's thrift store finds, and somehow it all made sense. That night, after the girls were asleep, Mason and Elena sat on their back porch watching fireflies and talking about nothing in particular, just two people who'd found each other in a moment of desperation and built something lasting out of it. "Thank you," Elena said eventually. "For what?" "For noticing, for caring, for not giving up when I made it hard. Thank you for letting me, for trusting me, for teaching me that the best investment I ever made wasn't in tech or real estate or any of that. It was in people, in you." They sat in comfortable silence, two former strangers who'd become everything to each other, while the summer night wrapped around them and fireflies danced in the dark. And in the grocery store parking lot across town, other lives were intersecting. Other moments were happening that would ripple forward into futures no one could predict. Other people were making choices to see or look away, to help or walk past, to notice or ignore. The world was full of those moments, Mason realized. Thousands of them every day. Most people missed them, too busy or too tired or too convinced that one person couldn't make a difference. But Mason knew better now. One person absolutely could make a difference. One moment of kindness could change everything. One choice to notice could save a life. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, it could save your own.